Welcome back to the CTSO Advisor Toolbox. Today in Objective 10, we will be identifying one career development or competitive event that fits with your skills and chapter. So before we begin, I want you to think to yourself, why do CTOs have competitive events in technical and leadership areas? Also, what benefits do these events afford to students? Well, off the top of my head, I think that CTOs have competitive events so that students can take what they've learned in the classroom and apply it to a real-life scenario. And what benefits do these events afford to students? It's a resume builder. When I was in Educators Rising and I placed first in the nation for my public speaking, that was an opportunity for me to put on my resume that I was a skilled public speaker and a national champion public speaker. And so these are opportunities for students to build their resumes, and they're opportunities for students to, like the real world, be competitive in their field. So here are some examples of competitive events. Let's look at one from FBLA. So in this competitive event from FBLA, students need to submit a cover letter, a resume for this competition called Job Interview. And so the purpose of this competition is to prepare students, or have them prepare rather, for engaging and how they would act within a job interview. This is kind of a common competition among CTSOs, and most of them have something like this. But for the most part, what you are looking at here on the competitions page will give you an idea of whether or not your class is prepared for that. One of the things that you can do is see what competitions align with the standards in your state. I don't know if all CTSOs have this, but at least here in Arizona, I have created for early childhood ed and education professions an alignment for all of the 19 national competitions for Ed Rising and aligning them to state standards so that you know that you can kill two birds with one stone. While preparing students for competition, you can also be meeting the standards and the requirements of your curriculum from the state. So by looking at these different guides, you can gauge an idea of whether an event will meet the requirements of your state. Down here, you'll see the formatting guide, more information, and a rating sheet, which is basically your rubric. So scribble this down on a piece of paper or keep it in the back of your head. What criteria should we use when selecting CTSO events in which to compete? One of the easiest criteria is, what is your class? So if your class, for example, is in DECA and it's a marketing class, you probably aren't going to have students that are as well prepared for the accounting competition as students who are in accounting classes. On the same token, if you are in FBLA, or if you are in Skills USA, let's say, and you teach automotive, but one of your students wants to do the photography competition, you need to ensure that the preparation of your CTE program aligns with the competitions that your students are doing. And so those are just some criteria. You should also consider how your students' personalities with certain competitions, because a more introverted student might not feel as comfortable doing the public speaking competitions for any of the CTSOs, but they may be more comfortable doing something like a portfolio. So you should make sure that you understand who your students are and what your class is before choosing events in which to compete. So did you consider your program direction? Right? So again, we were talking about whether, if you're in DECA, if you teach marketing, your students probably aren't going to do as well as the students that have been taking accounting all year. Your available resources. So thinking through, if you're doing public speaking, have you talked to your speech and debate coach at your school? The maturity of your CTSO. So not only an age of the CTSO itself, but the age of the CTSO at your school. If this is your first year as a CTSO, maybe you don't want to dive right into all the competitions. Maybe you want to take it slow. Put your feet in the water first before you dive right in. And then make sure that there are opportunities for all interested students. Again, like I said, if you have a more extroverted student, maybe they would be better at the public speaking competition. But a more introverted student may be more comfortable doing something like a portfolio. So, teaching competitive events in your classroom curriculum is something you can do. It absolutely is. Most competitions align with state standards, so you can find and figure out which competitions align by maybe visiting your national website or contacting your state director. How can you prepare students for competitive events during class time? Well, one of the ways that you can do this is having your students go and do sort of a literature review about a competition or a series of competitions and having them present them to the class. Maybe you can have students do it as an assignment. Because they align to state standards, you can ensure that you are being correct in your rationalization of implementing these as something that you can do during class time. So you can prepare students in a multitude of ways. Some competitive event tips. Go slow to go fast. Just use a couple events at first, especially if you're a new CTSO. As an advisor, it's very, very difficult to manage if you have 19 students in 19 different competitions, right? So maybe having just a couple students to begin with and then expanding as you go. Integrate them into your curriculum. Again, most competitions align to state standards. You can use student mentors to train students for competitions. And this includes inviting alumni back and judging contests that you have during class time for certain competitions. In certain CTSOs, you can only submit 1 or 2 students to a competition, but if you have 4 interested, you have to choose the best ones. So using student mentors, having them come back and coach is a great way to do that. Ask your state director or experienced advisors for past tests, case study examples, right? Organizations, FBLA, HOSA, there are a couple that have testing, right? EdRising doesn't have testing, but case studies are throughout all CTSOs, right? Because we're trying to prepare students for future careers. Contact the national office for your example and materials. Make sure you visit their website. Look up YouTube videos. FFA had an awesome parliamentary procedure video. Their competition is really, really cool. And that was one when I was training for state office that I watched. So Google them on YouTube. You can find my competitions for EdRising, so you can find them for just about any CTSO. There is a competitive events update meeting at summer conference for advisors and fall leadership conferences usually. So before we end today's video, what competitive event will you pursue? How and when will you prepare students? Scribble that down or keep it in the back of your head. Join us next time for looking at Objective 11, analyzing and selecting community service opportunities appropriate for your school and community. Have a great day.